So, Sarah, the events in the film Suffragette take place over 100 years ago. Why make this film now?
It felt really timely. I mean, on one hand, it felt overdue. This story's never been told, and it was such a vital piece of our history, and it felt we should be resurrecting these women who changed the course of history. And it also resonated with so much of what's going on in the world today, where we still haven't got equality. Women are still fighting for basic human rights in some parts of the world.
Right. Well, I mean, let's talk about that because it's been brought up quite a bit just this past year alone, even in Hollywood. You know, Patricia Arquette was talking about pay equity for women. Jennifer Lawrence is talking about it now. So there is a real relevance to this film.
Yeah, there is. Suddenly, women have become vocal, and there's a light being shone on the inequity in the film industry. And I think that's a great thing. It feels like it's gathering momentum, and that will result in change. And men and women are behind looking at that inequality.
It took a while for you to get this film made, is that right?
Yeah.
Start from the beginning.
So I'd wanted to tell this story for about 10 years, and then I got together with Faye Ward and Alison Owen, the producers, who also were interested in this movement, and we brought on Abby Morgan, who was a writer we'd worked with before and who was the right collaborator, and she was also passionate about this story. And then we spent 6 years developing and exploring the material and the research before we had a script that we were ready to go out to the actors with. So it was a long journey.
Carey Mulligan's character, how did you settle on her as the protagonist?
Well, we decided it would be interesting to focus on the foot soldiers of the movement, the working women, the women with no platform and no entitlement, who sacrificed so much and achieved such a lot. And so we centred it around this character, Maud Watts, played by Carey Mulligan. We always wanted Carey for this role, and then when we approached her, luckily she was as enthusiastic about it as we were about her.
What was it about her that made her the perfect Maud Watts?
Well, I think Carey's an extraordinary actress. She's able to inhabit a role so fully. She's so truthful. We wanted to create a world which felt very authentic and real and believable. And Carey's character has to carry this enormous emotional journey. And she's an actor who's totally capable of all those shifts and showing that complexity.
Now, this is your second feature film. And it's a big period drama. You've got a lot of giant set pieces in it. What did you learn while you were taking this leap forward as a filmmaker?
I did learn a huge amount. I mean, I had a fantastic crew around me. We chose some fantastic heads of department. You know, we had Edu Grau as a cinematographer, we had Alice Normington, the production designer, and many, many others. And we spent a lot of prep. I mean, I'd worked on it for 6 years, and a lot of that time I'd been preparing how it should be shot, how it should feel. We storyboarded all these set pieces. These were women of action. You know, their motto was deeds, not words. So we had the Derby to restage. We had Breaking Windows along Oxford Street to restage. And period London isn't easy to find. You know, you find pockets of it, but a lot of it's been destroyed in the Blitz or regentrified. So we had to use a lot of visual effects, huge amounts of supporting artists. We got access to the House of Commons as the first film to get access, which was very exciting.
Well, let's talk a bit about the style of this film, because it feels like there's a sense of immediacy to the way that it's shot and the way it's put together. It feels very modern. Was that intentional on your part?
Yeah, I wanted to break with the convention of period dramas where, you know, which I admire, I have to say, but you watch them at a little bit of a distance and admire their beauty. And what we wanted to do is create something very visceral and where you really felt that you were in the shoes of these women walking down the streets in 1912 and what the world was like for them. And also when we researched it, everything was so surprising, you know, and it felt so contemporary and relatable too. And so we tried to make it feel as authentic and connected as we could, which meant we had a handheld camera a lot of the time. So we were capturing the performance, giving the actors quite a lot of freedom. We tried to create 360 sets so that we could shoot anywhere. The costumes were actual stock, you know, they were wearing clothes from 100 years ago. And so that all contributed in the acting. You know, the actors hardly wore any makeup, and the performances were all very stripped down and authentic, I hope.
Right. It's a great ensemble in this film. Can you talk a bit about finding the other actresses who are right for these roles and, you know, working with them and kind of getting them to work together?
Yeah, so once we got Carey on board, we built the cast around her, and we wanted this eclectic range of actors to reflect the different women in the movement, different ages, and came from different walks of life. So we had we were excited by the idea of having Helena Bonham Carter, who's such an extraordinary actor, working alongside Carey. She had her own peculiar history with the suffragettes because her great-grandfather was Herbert Asquith, who was the chief antagonist of the suffragettes because he was the Prime Minister at the time who opposed votes for women. But she was all up for playing a suffragette and having a posthumous conversation with her own great-grandfather. And then we had Anne-Marie Duff, who I was always loved in the theatre as well as on screen. And then we also had Romola Garai, and we had the men, Brendan Gleeson and Ben Whishaw, and then Meryl Streep.
Oftentimes in movies like this, you hear the criticism of, the men are being demonized. But I didn't really get that sense from this film. Was that something that was a struggle, not making the men seem like sort of two-dimensional opponents of the right to vote? Or
we were really keen to have complex, nuanced male characters because, of course, the men weren't all villains in that day. There was a whole range of different responses from the men at the time. And so we tried to reflect that in the film. So we have Helena Bonham Carter's character's husband is a supporter of the movement, and there were 3 couples who supported the movement, but the men supported it. And then we also have Sonny, who's Maud's husband, played by Ben Whishaw, who's a man really caught by the conventions of his time and shamed by the community for having a wife who stepped out of line. And then we have Inspector Steed, played by Brendan Gleeson, who's a man who's trying to uphold the law, but then begins to realise that perhaps that law isn't right.
And it's interesting the arcs that these various characters go through as sort of reflected through this movement. As a filmmaker, juggling all these different characters, was that difficult?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because we had an ensemble, and it was very exciting to have all those great actors in front of the screen, and they were all keepers of their character. They all were absolute consummate professionals and brought so much to the project. But yes, it was a fine sort of balance in the edit as well of keeping the balance of the story right.
So 5 years ago, Catherine Bigelow became the first woman to win an Oscar for directing, and it felt as if this door was being opened. And yet there hasn't been a woman nominated for directing since then. Is it because of opportunities that aren't there, or is it just simply, what is it, what do you think?
It's hard to know what it is. I mean, I think it's probably many factors. I think it's, Catherine Bigelow did a lot for inspiring a generation of filmmakers, including me. And I think role models are essential. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And I was inspired. I became a filmmaker because I saw the work of women filmmakers. And so I think that we need to keep redressing that balance. We need to keep scrutinising it. And at the moment, what's really exciting is that I think more than ever this year, it's a part of the conversation like never before. And I think that will start to shift things, create awareness, and hopefully encourage more women to step up, to offer themselves, to apply for jobs, and hopefully encourage more executives to take them on.
And I mean, this film is unique in the fact that, it has a woman director, a woman writer, woman producers, almost all a female cast with the exception of a few roles. Is it creating those opportunities for yourself as well?
Yeah, I think it is about, it was great that we employed so many women in roles you don't normally see them in. We did, of course, have some men in key roles too, who were as supportive of the project as the women. But I think it is about having, keeping an eye on it and looking at the balance of your set and having more diversity behind the camera in all sorts of respects because, as we all know, film's a mirror to life and we want to be reflecting the world we live in, and those stories are interesting and should be told, and there'll be an audience for them, I believe, and we should keep looking at that.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Very good to talk to you.